welcome to our art and meditation. So it's Mocktails, Art and Meditation. It's sponsored by the Board of Trustees for Capital City Unity, and it's such a great idea that we've also invited some of our friends who are also on this path and journey that you may recognize or maybe not. We thought this would be a great way to break up COVID. You know, have a little cocktail or mocktail. Cheers. And learn something and just hang out with good friends. So welcome, everyone. Now, I'm going to say that this was inspired by Sister Wendy Beckett. Some of you may be familiar with her. She had a beautiful TV show, many books, and not that Susanne, although she's many things to many people, is a sister. Well, she is a sister, but a religious sister. But she is an amazing person. Most of you know Susanne. If you haven't crossed paths with her, I think you probably all have, actually, looking at who's here. I met Susanne nearly 40 years ago. We worked together. And we worked in the same office, and I came to see her as a Renaissance woman. There is almost nothing Susanne can't do. I mean, she studied architecture, she studied art, she does plumbing, she tiled her own fireplace, for God's sake. I mean, and the utility room floor. I mean, she can talk about history, she loves to travel. She's a font of information. And yet well, there's one thing that Susanne can't do. Susanne can't sew. I know this for a fact, but she's one hell of a glue gunner and stapler, and many things get put together in that way. So sorry for telling you a little story on you, Susanne, but you know, just like you shared that, what did you say? The Italians always left something unfinished or unaligned.
Yeah, imperfect.
Imperfect, so that you couldn't reach the divine and compete with God. Susanne can't sew. And so, moving on though. Susanne continues to expand her world, and for about the last 2 years, she's studied to be a docent for our wonderful art gallery here in Sacramento, the Crocker. And given the amount of hours she puts in, it's almost like the equivalent to, if not a master's degree, at least a major in college. And she continues to take continuing education classes and leads docent tours. So with the inspiration of Sister Wendy and the talent of our own Susanne, that's why we're here today. And I know she's got some great things lined up. So Susanne?
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you, Claudia, for that lovely introduction. I could go on and some stories about you, but we'll save that for another Cocktails, Mocktails, Art and Meditation. And Claudia will be doing our meditation today, and she does an excellent meditation. As Claudia mentioned, I do docent work, which is guide, for the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento. It is the oldest museum in the West. And I'm going to pick a couple of pieces from the Crocker and talk about symbolism in those pieces. And Claudia is going to put this up on the share screen. So we're going to, there we go. All right. So let's start with this first piece. And let me give you a little bit of the origins of the Crocker collection. It began with the family purchases. The Crockers, E.B. Crocker and his wife, Margaret, made family purchases during their grand tour to Europe from 1869 to 71, which is what all the wealthy families did at that time. And of course, Europe was the hotbed of art and collecting, and they went to Dresden, Germany, which was a center of art at that time. The original collection included about 700 oil pieces and about a little over 1,300 artworks on paper, which were very popular at that time: etchings, drawings, charcoals, pencil. They filled 9 railroad cars when they came into New York on ships and then were railroaded across the country. Remember, the West had just been opened up by railroad not many years before that. So they were able to move those pieces across the country, and they were fully installed in the new museum built specifically to house this collection in late 1873. So the Crocker European collection includes 19th century Central European art, 17th century Dutch art, and Flemish paintings, and some Italian Baroque paintings. The museum, the original historic building, is still there today, and it houses the historic collection, and then a small Asian collection and a fantastic ceramics collection. And then there's a brand new Teal Center, that about 125,000 square feet, which has more contemporary, impressionist, abstract art. So let's start with art telling a story. It's a conversation. It's a conversation by the artist that provides a glimpse into the life or the social mores of the times. It's an allegory or a story, or it's the artist's commentary. So, you know, art can be as straightforward as a gorgeous landscape that uses a new technique that you see perhaps in the Impressionists, or brilliant colors, or as a piece jammed with hidden meaning. And we're going to talk about some of that hidden meaning right now. So let's begin the conversation with the oldest painting in the Crocker collection. And this is, as Claudia has put up, the Nativity Triptych. You probably will recognize this. Any of you have toured any of the churches or the museums globally, you will see nativity scenes. Now, this painting was about dating to the 1400s. The artist is unknown, but they believe it looks like it was from the Netherlands. It's oil on a wood panel. It was at the very beginnings of the Renaissance and the age of rebirth, and it was a time when the world woke up and recognized itself, and the artist began to break away from the reins of the church, and they began to interpret the world as they saw it. Religious images, as you see here, did not go away, but began to have meanings of their own. Most religious art is elusive or built around themes familiar to the intended observer. So if you were looking at this piece in the 1400s, you would understand the conversation taking place. The 3 panels were usually commissioned for chapels by wealthier patrons. And this one is very unique is because it's complete. The 2 wing pieces are with the main central piece, and usually they were broken or cut away or sold off, and you usually only see one of the 3 pieces. So this piece is in its entirety. And I'm going to ask Claudia to flip to the next one, because it shows the 2 wing pieces that are closed over the central piece. And this triptych would be only opened on specific religious holidays, such as Epiphany or Feast Day, which is in March. The 2 figures, the one on the left, we know is a pope of that time because he's holding the papal staff. And then what I have been told is the figure on the right is probably the patron, the gentleman who commissioned this particular piece. Okay, why don't we jump back to the opened triptych, Claudia, if you can. Thank you. The 3 biblical scenes appear in chronological order. Starting from the left is the Annunciation. In the central is the Nativity and the Adoration, and to the far right is the Circumcision. 15th century biblical scenes in the Netherlands followed the storytelling used from illustrated manuscripts. So if we look at the left panel, we see the angel Gabriel announcing to Mary that she is expecting the Christ child. Now, angels are very prominent in much of the religious art that we see. The angels have appeared in the Bible during most important events, and these are messengers who signify that times have changed or will be changing. So as we see in the left panel, there's lots of symbols, very ordinary symbols that you wouldn't expect, such as Mary is usually, but not always, shown in blue. You see her blue, lovely blue, heavy velvety gown. And you also see the lilies that represent Mary's purity. Now the angel you can see in the background, Gabriel, is then, and above the pillow on the bed, a dove of peace. Mary is bringing forth the Christ child, who's the symbol of peace. Again, Gabriel moves into the central panel, and we see Mary again with the Christ baby, Christ child, and Joseph is in a red cloak, and that symbolizes red because he gave all his love and understanding to Mary. But I want you to notice that he doesn't have a halo. And that's in a way unusual. Usually you'll see the family, Mary, Joseph, and the Christ child, all have halos, but only in this particular panel, Mary has the halo and the baby Jesus has the halo. So as you move down towards the bottom of the little not landscape, but the garden of the flowers, it looks like there are tiny daisies. Those represent purity and chastity. The shepherds in the back on the right-hand side represent the poor. Christianity, the Christian religion, addressed the poor and is contrasted with the spirituality of the Holy Family. So they're dressed very plain, peasant-like, while the the Holy Family is dressed in very rich robes. Oxen facing outward is because they follow the Christ child. And then in the very back behind the oxen is the donkey that looks disinterested, and he's turned away, and he represents non-believers. So you can all see lots of little pieces in this scene. And in the very, very back is kind of a landscape scene, right? And that's kind of how landscape was relegated during those time. It was not a main focus of any artwork. So it just a little glimpse, and if you can see, it probably was a glimpse of how the house looked. At far left-hand side, you can see the bed, the windows, and it probably gave some allusion to some of the buildings of that time too. The far right panel, the circumcision, is done 8 days after the birth of a male child in the Hebrew tradition. It's also the day the child is named. And Jesus being named for Savior or salvation, in meaning, from the Hebrew meaning. It's usually done by a moil with a prayer shawl, although this one is richly clothed. And again, Joseph is present, and the woman representing Mary, take a look at her. And Claudia, do you notice something different about her?
Well, her hairstyle is certainly interesting.
Exactly. She doesn't look like the Mary in the central painting. And if you look at her clothes, look at the difference between her clothes. So she's probably the wife of the patron who commissioned this piece, because she doesn't have the blue robe representing Mary, nor does she have a halo. She has a very, as you said, a very interesting headpiece of the times. The little animal at the base of the altar, some say it looks like a lion. It's actually a dog, and that represents faith and loyalty. And what I also what's interesting about the tile, that's Italian tile, and that pattern is represented in the Crocker Art Gallery in the historic building, and there are several rooms that have very similar tile like this. So it's an interesting. I don't think it was done intentionally for this piece. I just think it was a happy circumstance. Any any other comments? I'm trying to look and see if there was something else that we might have.
Well, I had the pleasure of joining you on that tour of the Crocker recently when they reopened, and you showed me the tile, and that was my reference in the beginning when I said the imperfection, that nothing is actually perfect. And then you told me also that the tile, it's not colored just on top, but the dye goes completely all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually right that artisans of that day in their paintings or in their architecture, tile work, any artisan would leave something imperfect because only God could make perfection. So there's, as I said, we saw that in the Crocker, and that was kind of a fun thing to do. All right, let's move on to still life and another way that there's symbolism in art, and that was done with still lifes. And you can jump to the next slide when you're ready. Perfect. Well, this one is called Still Life with Flowers in a Glass Bowl, which is exactly what it is. And it's the artist is Jan de Ham, Dutch, and it was done after 1636. It is oil on panel. It's a rather large piece. It's about 30 by 32, as you can see here in the thing, by about 23. So it's actually quite a nice large piece, and it doesn't show in here, but it's very luminous. It's just a beautiful arrangement of flowers and fruit and other natural items. But let me talk a little about the Dutch Republic at that time. In the 1600s was beginning to give rise to a great pride in national identity. And as the economy flourished with the Dutch East Indies Trade Company, they traded all over the world, South America, East Indies, of course, the merchant class became on the rise. And the royalty was dwindling. And as this powerful middle class changed patronage from the church and royalty, they began looking for something to showcase their wealth. And collecting art became fashionable and a way to show this wealth. So they didn't want religious painting, and they didn't want paintings of the royal family. They wanted a new genre. And that's how still life kind of came up on the rise. The Dutch artists started painting things that embraced the natural world, because the Dutch loved the natural world. But they were Calvinists, so they were somewhat conservative and rigid. Every painting had to have symbols to moralize or preach about life, and this particular piece is no different. Full-blown flowers here usually symbolize the fullness of life, the beauty and grace of life. But what's interesting about this is, where would you put this painting? You have an idea?
Oh, I put it in my entry hall. I mean, I like to see it when I came into my house. So yeah, it would be in my entry hall or someplace where I could see it as I walked by.
I would too. And many people were saying some of the still lifes that have fruit and game and food on it, they'd put it in their dining room. Well, the interesting thing about the Dutch is that they were hung in the homeowner's library, because the library was where the business was transacted, and these merchants wanted the people coming in to see how wealthy they were. So it was done in that particular room. Now, let me ask you about this. Does this look like a natural arrangement to you? Now, you do flowers, arranging.
I do flowers, and I delight in it. I would have a hard time putting that arrangement together because of the structure of it. the ability to keep some of those flowers which have weak stems standing that high and so symmetrical. I mean, maybe a more talented artist than I. The other thing is, Suzanne, is I rarely have, well, I have irises and tulips sometimes together, but I don't have, I don't have roses and chrysanthemums or, there's so many things here that flowers that yeah, I usually do whatever is at Trader Joe's or in my garden.
Exactly. Well, you hit the nail on the head with two different things. It is an impossible arrangement, and they wanted to show their wealth, and they did it with this impossible arrangements. These flowers were from all seasons, and they tell the viewer that this person is so wealthy that he could have flowers brought in from anywhere at any time. And it's also an unnatural, in a way, arrangement. Is that I know your flower arrangements. Flowers overlap, and you do build on them, but they don't have, everyone is showcased, and every flower here is showcased. There's no overlapping, and again, that goes to showing this impossible arrangement. So let's take a look a little closer at some of these flowers. Um, you said you mentioned you have irises and tulips. Tell me a little about the tulips. I know that we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned the value of tulips.
Tulips are like my favorite flower. I have a lot of favorites. One of the things I love about tulips is that they continue to grow even after they've been cut. So when you put tulips in water, they continue to grow. The other thing I love about tulips, I read in the book Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, which is tulips in the 1800s were exchanged on the stock market. In fact, they were almost the equivalent of the stock market, where a bulb would sell for thousands of dollars, which could be the equivalent of a normal worker's whole pay. So it wasn't done, these trading of these beautiful bulbs or these tulip bulbs that eventually would become beautiful, unique flowers like that striped one right there in the middle.
Exactly, exactly.
That, yes.
They were a currency. You were absolutely right. And the Dutch cornered the market. In fact, there was no other place. People would try to steal these or hijack shipments of these because they were so valuable. Well, we had been talking about symbolism, and you mentioned two flowers, roses, as you can see here, full-blown roses. Remember, these are roses from 400 years ago, so they are not hybrid. They are more of the old-fashioned David Austin, we call them David Austin or cabbage type roses. Roses, of course, love. That they represent love, and tulips, interesting too, represent perfect deep love. So we have love, we have cherries and strawberries. Can you see those towards the left, down at the bottom? There you go. They are the fruits of paradise and represent the souls of man or the blood of Christ, depending on your interpretation of it. We have a little dragonfly further down. There you go. The dragonfly is the devil waiting to corrupt them. And the butterfly up to the middle, right there, that is, symbolizes that life is fleeting, or a soul that is freed after death. Again, we see daisies, which we saw in the Nativity triptych, chastity. Decayed flowers, we'll see leaves that are dying and decaying. That is a warning against excessive material consumption. Life is fleeting. A dropped petal is a reminder of mortality. The little snails on the edge of the table, those are the circle of life. So that makes kind of sense because the snail's shell is circular. So the other thing I want to mention, which is kind of interesting, is that You can see the edge of the table here. And items projecting over an edge create create one thing, that a nearness with the viewer. But they also symbolize anything falling over the edge is life is precious and may fall at any time. So also we have fruits. There's a few fruits. Most of these are flowers and insects. There's a little bit of fruit there. Fruit had a higher meaning than flowers. And there were, like for instance, the grape is the blood of Christ. The apple is the temptation. And they had a better they were a better hierarchy. Why don't you go to the next one?
Oh, I want to say something if you
Oh,
don't.
okay,
Mind.
sure.
Up here, with this iris.
Yes, there it is.
The Bible, as Jesus said in the Bible, fear not, look at the lilies of the field. Do they, weep or sow for, and yet who's more adorned than them? And many scholars feel that the lilies of the field that they're referring to is actually the iris.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's actually the iris. We grew irises for years, and so I have all these books on irises, and that was referenced in that. I also thought it was so interesting, Susanne. Here's a pea pod in here.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I do not know exactly what peas mean, and I should know them, but that's a good one for me to look up.
And of course, the shaft of wheat. I mean, that's very symbolic.
Exactly.
In terms of abundance, and yeah, it's so fascinating. I love this painting. Oh, and of course, the acorns.
Acorns is new life. It's the circle of life and death. New life, but then it's falling over. So life is fleeting. Don't take it for granted. And the meaning of irises are wisdom. So that makes sense. The lilies of the field. So neither toil nor, I guess I should do better in my biblical
Me too.
things. So if you go to the next one, I want to show a little, the next one kind of shows this is such a beautiful piece. Again, a charming piece, but I wanted to show you because it illustrates what we were talking about, how the edge forms that nearness towards you. It almost feels like it's coming towards you. This again is roses and butterfly. And it has these, the rose petals, the rose leaves, which are coming over the edge. And they are symbolizing, of course, the fleeting life, and they're starting to decay. So it's a beautiful piece. But more interesting about this that I always find, it's done by a woman artist, Maria van Oosterwijk, who was Dutch. It was done there was no date, but obviously it was probably done in the 1860s, perhaps. She was a student of Jan de Ham, who was the artist who did the still life previously. It was unusual for women to be artists at that time, and certainly unusual for women to be recognized. And Maria was recognized by royalty, and Louis XIV purchased numerous paintings of hers. She's also was a firm believer in women's rights. She taught her servant to paint. And after Maria passed away, the servant was able to continue her livelihood by painting and selling and painting. So I always find that quite interesting. She's to me a phenomenal painter. And again, this painting is very luminous when you see it in person.
And I love that she has those carnations in there. You kind of almost miss that with the roses so predominantly
exactly
in the foreground, but that looks like a carnation. I mean, that is like, that's what carnations, when you see them, look like, with their stems, how they come out of that. And I also love, Suzanne, the detail she put into this stone counter. I don't know if it's granite or marble, but it just looks so real. It looks more like a photograph than a
Mm,
painting.
exactly. The type of painting that she was doing is called, I'm going to pronounce this, chiaroscuro, I think it's pronounced. It's that balance between dark and light. And the Dutch were masters at it, where things would be illuminated, but then the blackness would fade away into the background. So there were certain things that were illuminated. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And carnation um, represent fascination, also love, uh, um, and they supposedly grew from the Virgin Mary's tears, which I think is
Really?
kind of
Oh, I
interesting.
didn't know that. Well, she, she went to great deep length here. I mean, here she's got a little fly sitting on this. It's like,
Yeah,
she didn't have to paint that on there. I
yeah,
mean, that's just more work.
yeah, right. And again, over the edge, the fly was a one step below the dragonfly, which of course was the devil waiting to corrupt them. So it's it's on a decaying or a dying rose leaf. So it's just a very symbolic painting. We would look at it and say, "Oh, it's a beautiful," and the people of the time would look at it and go, "Oh, I understand the meaning of this. This is what she's telling us." So. And then, as we were talking about fruits having a higher hierarchy, that last piece that we're going to look at, um, and this is not at the Crocker. This is at the Norton Simon, from the Norton Simon. It's done by the artist Francisco de Zubarán, and it was painted in again in 1630, 1633. And when you see lemons, oranges, and roses together, that's the Holy Trinity. So that's Mary, Joseph, and the Christ child. And of course, Francisco did also put in the orange blossoms, so starting of new life. So this again is a beautiful, beautiful piece of painting at the time. So anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell, so to speak, just a little walk through symbolism in a couple of pieces of art. And I hope it starts the conversation with people when they look at a piece of art and saying, what is the artist trying to tell me here? And art should make you feel something. It does, you could, whatever emotion it is that it elicits in you, it should make you feel something. And I urge people to look at art and enjoy it, and learn more about it, because it does tell a story. So I think we're ready for a meditation, don't you?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's just awing
Thank you.
to be able to look at this and have you walk us through it, and probably spend more time on each piece. When you start to look, you see more, of course. And yeah, I'm very pleased, and I know I see people nodding. Everybody's like, yay, let's do it again. Oh, thumbs up,
Okay,
thumbs up.
we'll do it again.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move back to this piece, which
Okay.
I really, really love. And now let's just kind of take in all this goodness. We're going to use this beautiful Still Life by Dahim. It's a springboard into our meditation right now. So as you sit comfortably with your feet either flat on the floor, or maybe sit cross-legged, whatever feels comfortable for you, just kind of settle in. Some say it works best to lightly close your eyes to shut out any visual distractions. Or you may just want to look at this beautiful painting. Just kind of look. Maybe find a certain focal point. Maybe something touches you. Let your eyes focus in. And now blur. Just breathe. Breathing in to a count of 4 or 5 and pausing. And then exhaling to a count of 6 or 7. It's the exhale breath that relaxes you. It's that release. So inhaling calmness, confidence, releasing stress and anxiety. Inhaling love and beauty. Exhaling fear. If you find your mind wandering during this meditation, that's okay. Just bring your focus back to the breath. Or go deeper. Go deeper into the painting. And now I invite you to imagine yourself sitting in a soft, gentle shaft of light. Imagine it starting at about 4 feet above your head, moving, touching the top of your forehead, moving down your neck, your shoulders, that warm light. And at each point, as it moves down, feel yourself relaxing, moving down your spine. Let that light swirl around your core, and then move into your hips, your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles, through your feet, moving down to the center of the earth. And now, move your focus to your heart center. And imagine that white light swirling around your heart center, soft and gentle, opening your heart center. Maybe imagining your heart center as a flower or a rose, opening up to the bright sun. Now I would invite you to think of someone you love, a child, a grandchild, a partner, maybe a beloved pet, or a parent, or a grandparent. It does not matter if they're on this physical plane or not. Love knows no boundaries. Love is love. Now focus on this love. And focus on your deep desire for this person's health and well-being. Focus on loving this person or pet until you feel like your heart will break because it's so full of love. Brene Brown calls opening up to this depth of feeling being vulnerable. And where we may have shied away from this feeling in the past because of fear, our fear of loving someone this much, it would be unbearable if they were to leave us or die. There's a great strength in acknowledging our vulnerability and leaning into love. Now take this feeling of love, the love we saw in Mary for the baby Jesus, and see yourself in your mind's eye as a baby or a young child. Maybe you remember a photo of yourself, or maybe you have an early memory. We forget to remember that we are so wonderful. And taking us back to when we were so new to this world and so very special and so beloved. That little baby, that grace, that innocence, that beacon of love embodied. And then as we entered the toddler stage, we delighted in the newness of everything as we grew to be more inquisitive and precocious and questioning, soaking up everything around us like a sponge without a filter. And now, I invite you to move yourself to where you are today, at this age, the age that you are right now. I invite you to tell that little one, that little child, that little baby, just how wonderful they are. Take a moment to marvel at this younger you, that beautiful baby, that precocious and precious child. Take a moment to celebrate that little person that was you and still is you and with you today. Let my words be your words to this inner child. Ah, ah, my beloved child, you are amazing. You have done well. You have come here to this earth to be a light. And that light continues to shine through you. I bless you. I honor you. I behold the Christ in you. For the light of God I see. As we close this meditation, I recall for you yesterday's daily word. Deep gratitude fills my heart and mind. Can you feel that? Deep gratitude fills my heart and mind. During times of quiet contemplation, I bring to mind everything I have to be grateful for. And those thoughts fill my mind like the exquisite flowers in this painting. Too many to count, too beautiful to choose one. My gratitude for all things great and small overflows as abundance and wonder fills my life. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, for the peace that passes all understanding, for the gift of grace, for the gift of love, for the gift of being. Amen. Ah. Hi. Thank you, my friends. It's been a wonderful, I don't know how long. How long was it, Susanne? It's like time stood still.
I don't know, but we'll be back again.
I hope so. I know it's a lot of work on your part, but
It's a joy. It's a pleasure.
Well, it always is a joy when you're sharing your talents and your treasures. So thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much from that.
All right.
So stay tuned, friends. We might be back.